Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Big League Recruitment Podcast today. It's me and Brenton, our co-host here with Jennifer Grady of the Jennifer Grady Firm. They focus on a few different types of law, business, employment, of the several types. I'm going to let Jennifer get into this today, but she's running a successful practice that she's founded since 2012. They're expanding, they're growing, and they're doing great. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We're pumped to have you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. So excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess just to kick it off, if you could just intro just maybe a little deeper on yourself and what's up with the Grady Firm right now, that would be awesome.
Okay, great. So right now we're pretty busy helping people rebuild their workforce after COVID. And so we work as counsel either for startups and really teach them everything from startup to business formation to contracts to hiring. And then for our larger corporate clients, we help them recruit talent from abroad. And by doing that, we do employment visas for managers, executives, people with STEM degrees, people from specific countries like Canada and Australia. And we help them do the visa, help do their renewals. And then with the onboarding, we help do the onboarding paperwork. We counsel if they're having HR issues or they want to fire someone. We might talk about better ways to do that with dignity for both the employee and the employer, and to always get that in writing all the way up to severance agreement. So we're really the first person that an employer would call when they have any personnel issues.
Awesome. So I guess just to kind of kick things off, being that, you help, obviously employers and candidates in different ways, job candidates or, people working in a role. I guess people come to us with a lot of different questions about the recruitment agreement, what's in the guarantee, what's in the contract, like what actually should be there to protect, the person who's hiring a recruitment agency, if they're going to hire an agency. Have you seen any tips or maybe anything happen in the past of, suggestions that you would give a company who's looking to bring on a recruitment agency and what you would put in the agreement?
Sure. So you would definitely want to go through the agreement and think of all potential situations that might happen. So what if we're spending all of this money to recruit a candidate and it doesn't work out? Is the recruiting agent going to offer you a complimentary replacement? If so, within what period of time? You might want to work that out in case some is 8 weeks. Is that long enough to truly get to know a candidate and figure that out? Or do you need something more like 90 days? And then would you still owe them the full fee? Would you owe partial? I have seen some recruiter agreements that do seem pretty one-sided and definitely asking a lot of money. But if you're going to do that, you want to make sure the service is worth it. So ask them what is their experience, what's their success rate, different things like that.
Yeah, and it really is important that they work with somebody that has a two-sided agreement that makes it a win-win. You find that a lot of the time, if a company maybe is just a generalist and they aren't very, confident in their placements, maybe they'll do extremely low prices and make it seem like it's completely one-sided for the client. And on the vice versa, if they're very seasoned, you notice a lot of times they're charging 25 to 30% across the board because they know that they're placing really awesome candidates and they have a success rate that can improve their track record. So it's such a good point. You want to be careful about, no matter what situation, who you're doing business with, who you're letting, have control over your talent to some extent, because it's really building the future of your company. That's a great point. So I guess on the flip side, since you work with candidates as well, and the onboarding process of candidates, when you're hiring someone, what do you see generally? Because I actually had a conversation with one of our clients about this, like I think a week and a half ago when he was onboarding someone new. It's what should be written in the offer, what docs should be included, and then maybe what shouldn't you put in the offer as well? Because I noticed maybe some companies want to overpromise to make their offer letter look enticing, but maybe that could bite them down the road,
Okay, that's a great question. And this is an area where I see a lot of mistakes on both sides. I have people when they are terminated, they're going to look for a lawyer because they're upset about it. And so a lot of times we'll go back and look at the offer letter, and I see a lot of issues over bonuses or promising of stock. It's maybe some kind of messy sentence in the middle of their offer letter, and it's not articulated. And a lot of times they'll say, okay, we'll talk about that later. We'll give you the bonus agreement later, and they never do it. Mm-hmm. And so that employee maybe quit their job, maybe moved across country in order to take this position, and in reliance on this, maybe they took a less base salary with the promise of this bonus. So no matter what, you want to have any additional compensation articulated in an agreement. And please don't use an agreement you find off the internet. You could get one for a few hundred or a few $1,000s from a lawyer that's tailored to your company, often that you can maybe reuse and just run by them for specific changes. But you definitely want to make sure you talk about whether they're exempt or non-exempt, and speak with counsel on doing that analysis. You're going to have their compensation. You're going to have that it's conditional, maybe on a background check and references, that they have to bring their I-9, which is going to be proof that they're able to work in the United States. And I also recommend putting a probationary period, perhaps 90 days. And while that's not going to change the at-will nature of the employment, and definitely want to put that in bold, this does not change the at-will nature. It's really setting expectations and setting the tone. So within the first 3 months, if we find out it's not working, it's a little bit cleaner if somebody knows that it's a trial run, as opposed to not doing that, then it's going to sting a little bit more. And I just think when you do need to let someone go, it always goes better if you're communicative, if you do have performance reviews or discipline reports with actionable measures on how to improve. I think people handle that much better if they know it's coming than if they're sidelined. And that's when they call a lawyer to review everything that they've ever done, dig through the personnel files, and find problems that can give them extra money.
That definitely makes sense. And there was a lot of value in there someone's going to be able to take from this, depending on what situation they're in. That's awesome. Thank you. So basically, on that note of, you were speaking about when people are being hired outside of the US to work in the US, and what type of documentation they might need. When do you typically, because we actually just put on a company last week who's looking to hire, internationally for attorneys as well as in the United States. So basically, what do you see is, maybe the common trend about when it makes sense to bring on that maybe visa, the temporary visa, and when does it also make sense to get more type of documentation involved, and maybe what docs would you recommend someone use?
Okay, so whether to hire someone who doesn't have a green card, they are going to need a visa, or maybe you can even sponsor them directly for a green card. That's going to depend, if you already have a prior relationship with this person. Maybe they came to you after they finished their degree and they have what's called OPT, which is optional practical training for a year or two, depending on the type of degree. And maybe they've come to work for you, you like what they've done, and now you have to do a visa to keep it going, because that can only last for a finite period of time. Or there's certain industries where maybe the US isn't as strong. I do a lot of visas for people in logistics. I would say principally from India. So definitely their educational curriculum is a little bit more tailored to that. Undergrad, they have engineering degrees, then maybe they come to the US and get a master's degree. Also doing a lot of visas right now for the trucking industry. As you know, with COVID, with so many shutdowns, transportation logistics have gone up. And the chief complaint is that people don't want to come back to work, or with trucking specifically, they don't want to go for 3 weeks at a time. So we get several calls a week for people looking for a driver from abroad. So many different situations, especially if you're a multinational company. You might be bringing talent from around the world. One of my biggest clients, they are always promoting from within and moving people to different countries. And they're going to bring their executives and their managers to the States. And so we would help with that. So visas do take a while. The best would be if it has premium processing and you can do 2 weeks for an additional fee. But you would still take at least a month probably to put that together. Other visas can take a year. So this is definitely something you want to think about in advance, since when people run out of status, it's a challenge. So we have to always think ahead and make sure that they're always available to stay here.
What are some of the things you see happen to companies who don't think ahead? Like, for example, they bring someone on, don't have the right type of documentation. What happens? Like, what could happen?
In terms of immigration, if you don't plan ahead, they wouldn't be able to come here. But in terms of just for regular people, do you mean if you don't do the proper paperwork, what happens?
Right. Like, in other words, what should they avoid?
I would say avoid, well, HR is something that you really need an expert in. So I'm probably on every mailing list from the government that there is. And, depending what state you're in, laws can change every 6 to 12 months. So you always want to have somebody that is entrenched in it. And so you can either hire an outside HR or PEO or an attorney, and you want to get your series of documents. And so we use different technology to make sure that we're keeping that. We use checklists because if you don't, or you misclassify someone, or say you're trying to use someone as an independent contractor when they should be an employee, and that would be a whole separate talk we could do on that.
Right.
So if you make these mistakes, it could be costly. And as I was saying, if somebody they get fired and they want to call a lawyer, now they're going to go and they're going to ask for your personnel file. They're going to ask for your records. They're going to see that you weren't clocking in and out, or you weren't getting paid overtime. And then, they'll draft a letter if you're lucky. And if not, they'll go straight to filing a lawsuit. And I would say a lot of states, especially California, are very pro-employee. And so they have statutes that automatically give them attorney's fees if they win. So this little error has now ballooned into something that's tens of thousands of dollars plus your fees plus theirs. So definitely making sure you have all the posters that you need, your offer letter, get your W-4, your I-9, all of those, and then keep them in a safe place. Has someone in your company that's in charge of that likes paperwork. A lot of people don't. So you want to find someone who's skilled at that, and they're going to follow up, because sometimes I'll give the documents to the clients and they won't get them completed. So now I just do it via e-signature myself to their employees directly, so that we all have a copy.
Right. And it's definitely, this is something that, larger businesses typically have a grip on, but for smaller businesses who are just looking to transition into a new business model or hire new talent from a new part of the world or country they aren't familiar with, or they haven't hired from before, this is why they need to call the Grady Firm. This is why they need someone like you, because there's a lot of questions that can cost people big money, and more than money, headache, sometimes their business, depending on the size of the business and what they're going through. So this is huge. The stuff that you're sharing, it might seem basic to some people who are listening to this, but to others, this could be game changing for what they're doing and the future of their company and their talent, et cetera. So appreciate that, Jennifer. Basically, one thing I'm wondering, because you kind of touched on it earlier about the guarantees and what pricing is going on in the industry of recruitment, and I'm wondering from your perspective. We shared a bit before this about what we do at Big League Talent. We have a solid guarantee from our perspective. We feel our pricing's right in line with competition, if not a little bit better sometimes than qualified competition, I should say. There's always the guy who will do it for less on the block, and that's not who we're necessarily here to compete with. But what do you see as some things when you're structuring a recruitment agreement that make us stand out from a perspective of when we write our agreement? How can we make ourselves more appealing to clients as a recruitment agency in terms of supporting what they're actually looking for?
Sure. So I would define your timelines, your expectations. Definitely want to talk about a lead if it's coming from you, or if it's coming someone contacted them independently. So how are you going to figure out who's going to get the commission for that? Have the term of your agreement. Is that going to renew automatically? Is it a specific period of time? Is it for one candidate? Is it for multiple candidates? Definitely, again, talk about whether what your guarantee is, whether that's a replacement or someone else, or a lesser fee. What if it doesn't work out? And then yes, those are some things.
Yeah, and you're making me feel great over here, because we have all that great stuff included in our agreement.
Awesome.
So I'm sure our clients are looking back grateful right now. I appreciate that. Okay, so I guess something I've came across really more recently when I was working with more of a fresh company. They've been around a few years. They're very successful, but they're just new to really onboarding any type of talent. And the question started coming up about paperwork and what to handle and how they should approach, the paperwork and onboarding process. So, when it comes to either laying off or hiring, what do you think is the boundary for us as a recruitment agency to help with the actual paperwork in-house?
Okay, so probably you would want to have your own offer letter template. And again, one thing I didn't get to mention before with the offer letter is I see sometimes people turning that into a term of employment. And so in the US, most states are at will employment, which means you can fire or resign for any reason or no reason, as long as it's not illegal. But I do see people creating a term where they don't need to. And so that would mean that you're taking away that at will aspect and saying now you're going to be here for 2 years or 1 year. And then if you fire them within that time, now you're going to owe them the wages for that period of time. And so that might make sense if it's somebody who's an executive, or you're bringing them from somewhere else or from another country. Often we have contracts saying we will pay for your legal fees for immigration, but if you leave the company within a certain period of time, you'd have to pay those back, either prorated or a certain amount. So there's pretty specific situations where you would want to make it for a term. Otherwise, we want to keep it as at will. So usually I have checklists for all of my clients for each employee, and we have it segregated into different areas. Number one would be prior to employment, and we would be checking references, getting job application, saving a copy of your job ad in case there's any claims of discrimination in hiring. We want to have a copy of that ad. Then before they start, we're going to give them the offer letter. Always give them a job description and update that as things change. I think really a lot of issues happen from misunderstandings about the job, or you're giving them more or less responsibilities and paying them the same. So we definitely want to have everybody clear on what they're supposed to do. And I think a lot of people miss having a good job description. And then we want to have, again, I-9W4 and have potentially confidentiality agreement, or have that as well. And then if you do have any bonus agreements or anything for stock, we're going to have a separate agreement for that. And so then we want to have all of this before they start employment. Even if you're going to have an arbitration agreement, you want to have that before as well, since we are giving up certain rights, maybe to arbitrate in exchange for employment. So it's important to have that signed before they start. And then during employment, you might want to talk about having discipline forms or performance review forms, requests for leave of absence, requests for medical leave, things like that.
And at the end of the day, what you're saying right now is just how we can level up our service as a recruitment agency in general as well. Like, how can we give our candidates a better experience through onboarding? How can we give our clients a more clear experience of who the candidate is and what's, really expected from both sides? This has actually been really, really beneficial, Jennifer. I want you to know that we really appreciate you over here. So let's start talking more about you, right? You've already given our audience a ton of value in the recruiting space, in the hiring space, and really in the legal space, because that's your expertise. So talk about your firm. So like, how has everything transitioned during the pandemic? We're working with attorneys who someplace, just in their local town, someplace completely international and virtual. And I know during the pandemic, there's been a huge transition in the legal space to going virtual because they didn't really have much of a choice, but some are transitioning back afterwards. Some are saying you can go full virtual. What's your experience been in the transition?
Sure. So we were already pretty much a virtual law firm before, and I've always had staff working for me throughout California, throughout the country, and we have clients around the world and across the country. So that wasn't too big of a deal. But now that we are transitioning to coming back, we're having in-person team meetings. And then if people are out of the area, then we're doing that via Zoom. So we've definitely beefed up, having team meetings once a week, meeting with my assistant once a week, and then leveraging technology. And we're always evolving. Even this week, we're trying to get another one that's going to be even more client facing, where they can see all the different steps of a case. And then know exactly what they need to do. And we have many different software, but we're trying to always see if we can consolidate and put it in one place for attorneys and for the clients.
Right. That makes sense. Have you found that since the pandemic, you've almost been not forced, but kind of in a way forced to look at ways to be more efficient, like how to become more technologically advanced? Like, have you taken a step back from being in person, which has caused you to improve in other areas?
So I would say I was always looking at doing that, but definitely the pandemic is forcing everybody to, I would say, cut the fat if you have to. I know some people that have really scaled down their business. Maybe they had a lot of employees, maybe now they have two and they're starting over from scratch. So I really would like to have people look at that as an opportunity where you learn from whatever you did before and now you're more lean. And then when you do bring that team back, you're going to be more, I would say, choosy about who has the skills that you need to grow in this current landscape, and just always be evolving and growing. I think that's kind of one of the best things to come out of the pandemic is.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you noticed that your team has been able to transition well to working together virtually versus being more in person? Have you felt a difference at all?
So I would say we're doing Zoom meetings, but I think sometimes Zooms can be a downfall. You can have a little bit less intimate conversations when you do meet people in person. It flows a little bit better, but Zoom does offer you the opportunity to do things where maybe you weren't in the same room or the same town. So I think there is an advantage, and we're kind of probably moving towards a hybrid model moving forward, where if people can make it, it's better. But for the people that are somewhere else, we want to give them the opportunity as well. I see that for conferences, for meetings, for even chambers of commerce, they're looking towards this hybrid model.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And that from our perspective, that gives your firm an advantage if you're looking to bring on more really seasoned attorneys or really solid talent, because some companies now are saying, hey, look, we want everyone back in the office to an extent, right? Like some call it flex, but it's not very flexible, right? Like it's just a bit flexible. So what you're doing is you're actually giving yourself an advantage by opening up who could possibly work for you in terms of the talent, just by your flexibility. That's because a lot of people actually aren't giving as much flexibility as it sounds like you are. So that's a big up for you all at the Grady Firm. You're doing something that candidates are mostly happy by. So what about your transition from going from one office to multiple cities? I mean, more multiple locations. That's typically, not easy to do. Some people can't even crack getting one done right. So what was your, I guess, secret sauce to being able to scale to 3 locations and still run your team effectively?
I would say, it's one way is to have different people that are in the city running the office and putting your brand there. And then you can visit when you need to, and then otherwise do things remotely, and you can serve more clients and keep leveraging that technology. I think is pretty helpful.
So would you say that systems are a big part of what you do and what's helped you be successful, just having repeatable, predictable systems in place?
Absolutely. I think you can't scale if you don't have infrastructure. So we're always kind of making a checklist of all the different points, touch points in the case, who's going to do what, making sure everyone on the team knows their responsibility so they're not stepping on toes. Outsourcing when you need to, but outsourcing doesn't mean advocating. So that means you still have to be involved and have your hand in things and know what's going on, or else you're going to start losing your quality. So I think you can never give up quality control.
100%. I agree. So Jennifer, you've been awesome. I want to say a huge thank you for having you for being on the show. So tell me this before we're done. People need to know, because you've been running a very successful firm. You are providing great results from all the reviews I've seen from your clients. So would you mind sharing, like, if someone's listening to this podcast, they're wondering, all right, Jennifer can probably help me save a lot of time, energy, and money on, the hiring process, the onboarding process. I just got laid off and I think it was a wrongful termination. Can you just explain to us who you really serve best and who you typically tend to work with? Just as like, who should be reaching out to you? It could be general, right? It doesn't have to be a niche specific, but who should be reaching out to you when they hear this and they need some legal help?
Sure. So I would say on the corporate side, the people that we help are going to be your HR person, your CFO, your C-suite, your operations manager. So sometimes we have a lot of people in the company that would have our number and they would call us, whether it's contract review or issue with an employee, or they want to bring on a new employee. And then for people that are terminated from their employment and they want to have somebody take a look at it and see, was there something done wrong? I can help them with that. I've also helped people keep their jobs when they're subject of an investigation, or they were let go, and I might help them negotiate better severance. And so I would say I do have a degree in dispute resolution. So I'm going to always try to do negotiations first, before we go to litigation, because it's costly and it's hurtful for everybody. And sometimes you don't always get the best results. Sometimes it's just asking the questions and really putting the two parties together and seeing how can we work this out best.
It's glad to hear you're putting your clients first and you know who you serve. And obviously you're doing a phenomenal job. So Jennifer, where can anyone find you who's hearing this and they want to contact you? What's the best place to reach out to you?
Sure. So you can find us at gradyfirm.com. That's GRADYFIRM. You can schedule a complimentary 15-minute consultation. And we have a lot of blogs, a lot of resources on our website as well that we're always updating when there's legal updates for businesses, from minimum wage to immigration updates to different tips for businesses.
You heard it, people. If you want someone to negotiate on your behalf, we got to reach out to Jennifer. In my experience with her, she's been awesome. Look at her track record. It says enough for itself. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being on our show. We've had an absolute pleasure having you on. And just, yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, it's been a pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.